The Cadaver Mutiny. There was an old man in the Yongsheng County who lived in Tsijian village. The village was about 5 to 6 li from the county town. He and his son ran an inn by the roadside, providing lodging for traveling merchants and wayfarers. Several cart drivers who frequently transported goods back and forth would always stay there overnight. One evening, 4 cart drivers arrived seeking lodging, but the inn was already full. Unable to find accommodation elsewhere, they earnestly begged the old man to take them in. After some hesitation, the old man thought of an alternative space, though he worried it might not meet their expectations. The men quickly assured him, "Any shelter from the wind and rain will do, we're in no position to be choosy." At that time, the old man's daughter-in-law had just died, and her corpse was still laid out in the room. His son had gone out to buy coffin lumber and had not yet returned. Thinking the mourning chamber was unoccupied, the old man led the 4 guests there along a narrow path. The 4 men entered the chamber. A flickering oil lamp cast dim light on the table, while behind the mourning altar hung a funeral curtain. The deceased's body lay covered with a paper shroud. Turned to the sleeping area, they saw a large communal bed. Exhausted from their journey, 3 of them began snoring as soon as they lay down, all but one man, who hovered in a half-awake state. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the funeral bier. The half-awake man snapped his eyes open the oil lamp before the altar illuminated the scene clearly, and to his horror, the female corpse threw off the paper shroud and jerked upright. Moments later, the female corpse lurched down from the funeral bier, inching toward the communal bed. Her face was waxen, her forehead bound in raw silk. She stooped over the sleeping men and exhaled 3 deliberate breaths onto each of them. Terrified, the awake guest feared he would be next. He furtively pulled the quilt over his head, held his breath, and froze. Moments later, the female corpse loomed before him, breathing on him just as she had the others. When he sensed her leave, he heard the rustle of the paper shroud and dared to peek out. There lay the corpse, rigid in its original place, as if it had never stirred. The guest was scared out of his wits. Not daring to make a sound, he desperately kicked the other 3 men with all his might, but they show no reaction whatsoever. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he thought to himself, rather than waiting to die, I'd better get dressed and flee for my life. He was about to get up and get dressed when suddenly he heard the rustling sound again. Terrified, he immediately lay back and pulled the quilt over his head. Just as he feared, the female corpse returned this time. She blew on him several times before finally leaving. A moment later, a noise came from the funeral bier. The female corpse had lain back. Slowly, he slid his hand out from under the quilt, felt for his trousers, and hurriedly pulled them on before bolting barefoot into the night. The female corpse also rose, as if to pursue him. But by the time she pushed aside the door curtain, he'd already unbolted the door and fled. She gave chase, and though he ran screaming through the village, miraculously, not a soul was awakened. He thought of turning back to knock on the old man's door for help, but feared the female corpse would catch up with him. So he fled toward the county town, running for his life. When he reached the eastern outskirts, he suddenly spotted a temple and heard the rhythmic tapping of a wooden fish from within. Without hesitation, he rushed to the gate and pounded on it frantically. A monk inside saw his frantic expression but hesitated to open the gate. In that brief moment of uncertainty, the female corpse closed in. Now a mere foot behind him, the guest was terrified out of his wits. Outside the temple gate stood a white poplar, its trunk so thick it would take 4 to 5 feet to encircle. The guest darted behind it, using the massive tree as a shield. When the corpse lurched right, he dodged left. When she lunged left, he veered right. Her rage mounted, but both combatants were wearing thin. Suddenly, the female corpse halted and stood rigidly erect. Seizing the chance, the guest ducked behind the tree, drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. Without warning, she lunged forward, arms flailing as she clawed wildly at him through the trunk. Terrified, his legs gave way and he collapsed, but with the trunk blocking her, the corpse could only clutch it in a death grip, freezing motionless at last. The monk, having listened intently behind the gate for some time, cautiously opened it when silence finally fell. There lay the guest, sprawled on the ground. Holding a candle close, the monk saw that while the man appeared lifeless, his chest still rose and fell faintly. Without delay, he hoisted the guest onto his back and bore him into the temple. Through the knight's vigilant care, the guest at last regained consciousness. The monk gave him hot broth and asked what had happened. The guest recounted the entire ordeal. By then, the morning bell had already sounded, and the sky was tinged with the first light of dawn. The monk peered up at the tree and there, just as described, the rigid female corpse clung to the trunk. Horrified, he rushed to alert the county magistrate. The county magistrate arrived in person to examine the corpse. He ordered his men to pry open the cadaver's hands, only to find them locked immovably around the trunk. A closer inspection revealed 4 fingers on each hand curled like iron hooks, their nails sunk deep into the bark. Only after summoning several strong men to pull together did they manage to yank the corpse free, leaving behind figure holes in the trunk so deep they might have been chiseled. A yeoman runner, dispatched to investigate the inn, found the old man's household in chaos over the missing corpse and the sudden death of 3 guests. After the runner explained the situation, the old man followed him to carry his daughter-in-law's body back home. The sole survivor wept before the county magistrate. 4 of us set out together, yet now only I remain. How can I possibly explain this supernatural ordeal to my village? The magistrate then issued an official testimony and arranged an escort to return him safely home.